what if I told you there's a place where people drive beneath the ocean just to get to work? Where sheep outnumber people, the wind is too strong for trees, and the sun disappears for months at a time. It sounds like the harshest corner of Europe, and in many ways, it is. Yet of the 50,000 people who live here, almost no one ever wants to leave. So what do they know that the rest of us don't? Welcome to the Faroe Islands, at the very edge of the world. Fact 1. Sheep run this place. Number 1, sheep basically run this country. There are about 55,000 people living on these 18 islands and roughly 70,000 sheep. That's more sheep than people. And they're not fenced in like you'd see back home. They wander wherever they want, across cliffs, through valleys, sometimes straight down the middle of the road. And when that happens, people just stop the car and wait. Nobody honks, nobody's in a rush. Even the name of the country comes from this. Faroe comes from an Old Norse word that basically means islands of sheep. That name is over 1,000 years old and it still fits. For most of their history, sheep were the difference between surviving the winter and not. The wool kept people warm, the meat kept people fed, and there wasn't much else the land could give. So if you ever see one standing on a cliff edge that looks impossible to stand on, don't be fooled. That's not staged for a postcard. That's just a normal Tuesday out there. For fact 2, they drive under the ocean. Here's a wild one. Most islands deal with getting from one island to the next the same way, or you wait for a ferry and hope the weather cooperates. The Faroes said forget that and went the other direction, down. Since the 1960s, they've built over 20 tunnels straight through solid mountain rock, and 4 of them actually run underneath the ocean floor, connecting islands that used to be a long, cold boat ride apart. A 5th one, even longer, just got approved. The big one is called the Eysturoy Tunnel. It's about 11 kilometers long, just under 7 miles. And at its deepest point, it sits 189 meters or about 620 feet below the surface of the Atlantic. To put that in perspective, that's deeper underwater than most submarines ever go. And here's the part that gets me every time. Right in the middle of that tunnel where 3 branches meet, they built a roundabout, underground, under the ocean. The first one anywhere in the world. They even lit it up with colored lights and silhouette art, so when you're driving home at night, it looks like you're passing through the northern lights. You're sitting in traffic, sort of, with the entire Atlantic Ocean sitting on top of your car, and it feels completely normal. That's the Faroe Islands for you. Fact 3. No trees, no mosquitoes either. Look at any photo of the Faroe Islands and you'll notice something's missing. Trees. There's almost no forest anywhere, just green grass, black cliffs, low clouds, and ocean in every direction. It's not because nobody planted any. Plenty of people have tried over the years. It's the wind. It's relentless out there, salty and strong enough that young trees just can't survive in the open. They get torn apart before they ever get tall. The only real trees you'll find are tucked into a few sheltered patches near the capital. But here's the upside nobody mentions. No still water, no real forests, constant wind scouring everything. That means almost no biting bugs. No mosquitoes buzzing around your head at night, no swatting at your neck every 5 minutes. You can sit outside in the evening, walk through wet grass, hike a cliff trail, and never once get bitten. The wind might mess up your hair, and the rain might soak your jacket, but at least nothing out there is trying to eat you alive. Fact 4. Season. In one afternoon, the locals have a saying, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, and they're not exaggerating. You can leave the house under a clear blue sky, and by the time you reach the next town, it's raining sideways. Then fog rolls in and swallows the whole road. Then the wind hits you like a wall, and then Before your coffee even goes cold, the sun's back out like nothing happened. Why? Geography. These islands sit alone out in the North Atlantic, right where warm and cold air collide. In summer, you get almost 20 hours of daylight, enough that some people barely close their curtains. In winter, that flips completely. The sun only shows up for a few hours a day. And let's be honest, a lot of the year here is just gray, wet, and windy. It's not constant sunshine and rainbows. It's rain, fog, and cloud, broken up by a few minutes of light so clear it almost feels earned. So tell me in the comments, what's the weather doing where you're watching this from right now? I'm genuinely curious. Fact 5. Grass foofs and how they kept warm without wood. If somebody showed you a photo of a tiny house with grass growing on the roof, you'd probably guess it was some fancy eco-resort. Out here, it's just a regular house. In tiny villages like Gassadalur and population barely a handful, homes sit under massive cliffs with nothing around but fog, ocean, and grass, and a lot of those roofs are alive. Real turf, layered on top the same way Viking settlers did it over 1,000 years ago. Not for looks, for survival. It keeps the heat in during brutal winters and helps the house stand up against winds that would tear a normal roof right off. And yeah, every now and then you'll catch a sheep just casually grazing on somebody's roof. So here's the obvious question. If there's almost no wood, how did anyone stay warm? The answer's underground, literally. For centuries, the Faroes cut peat, dense blocks of compressed earth and old plant matter, dried it out over the short summer, and burned it slowly all winter for heat, the same way people once burned coal back home. Today, a lot of their power comes from somewhere more modern, water and wind. The two things this place has never been short on. They basically turned their worst enemies, rain and gale force wind, into the thing keeping their lights on. Fact 6. Barely any traffic lights and zero McDonald's. In most places, sitting in traffic is just a part of life. Out here, that experience barely exists. Across the entire country, there are fewer than 10 traffic lights, and almost all of them are in the capital, Tórshavn. And that's not the only small number. One major airport, one university, one national broadcaster, a handful of hospitals covering every island between Iceland and Scotland. Most people here go their whole lives and never really know what rush hour feels like. Your biggest delay on the morning commute? A sheep, again. And here's a detail that says a lot. There's not a single McDonald's anywhere on these islands. No big shopping malls, no row after row of the same chain stores you see everywhere else. People finish work, go home, visit a neighbor, share a meal, or just stand at the window and look out at scenery that honestly looks too dramatic to be real. It's easy to mistake that for a place that's behind. It's not behind. They just decided that faster and louder isn't the same thing as better. Fact 7. People don't even lock their door. Here's a detail that'll really mess with how you think about safety. In a lot of Faroe's towns, people just don't lock their doors, not out of carelessness. There's just never been a reason to. Crime here is almost non-existent. None of the background noise of theft or violence that a lot of us have just learned to live with. Kids grow up with a kind of freedom that's basically disappeared everywhere else, and they can wander off over a hill on their own because the whole community is keeping an eye on things. One woman who moved here from Thailand put it simply: no pollution, no crime, and for the first time she felt completely at ease. And the reason isn't some strict system keeping everyone in line. It's the opposite. In a country this small, with about 55,000 people, nobody's really a stranger. People know each other or know somebody who does. Safety here isn't enforced. It grows out of people just treating each other decently day after day, until it becomes so normal that nobody even thinks to mention it. There's no big police presence, no security cameras on every corner, just a lot of people who've known each other their whole lives. So be honest with yourself for a second. Could you live somewhere like that? Would you even want to? Hang on to that thought, because we're coming back to it. Fact 8. They've made being cozy into an art form. There's a Faroe's feeling that doesn't really translate into English. The closest comparison is the Danish idea of hygge, being warm, comfortable, and deliberately at ease. A single lamp glowing in a window on a dark afternoon, quiet conversation around the kitchen table while the wind howls outside. It's not a small thing here. It's basically the whole point of daily life. When winter cuts daylight down to a couple hours, life turns inward toward home and family instead of fighting it. You see this most clearly in an old habit of just opening your home to people. Not a fancy dinner party, a simple meal, ordinary conversation with someone you might have just met that day. Locals will straight up invite strangers in to eat and talk. No big agenda, just food and conversation, and that kind of plain, unhurried moment does something a five-star restaurant never could. It closes the distance between people fast. You'd think that being this isolated would push people apart. Instead, it pulls them closer together. They need each other, and over time, that stops feeling like a burden and starts feeling like home. Fact 9. Food shaped entirely by the ocean and the wind. Forget everything you think you know about European food. If you show up expecting pizza and pastries, you're in for a surprise, because Faroe's food wasn't shaped by taste first. It was shaped by survival. The most Faroe's dish out there is called rest, lamb that's hung in a wooden, open-walled shed for months, letting cold ocean wind slowly dry and ferment the meat. Push that even further, almost a full year, and you get skerpikjöt, meat so wind-dried it turns tough and chewy with a smell that hits you immediately. To an outsider, it's an acquired taste. To a local, it tastes like home. Why go through all that trouble? Because for most of their history, they didn't have a choice. No refrigerators, barely any farmland. Drying meat in the wind wasn't some quirky tradition. It was how you made it through winter. That strong flavor everyone talks about today. It started out as just the taste of staying alive. The ocean fills in the rest. Some of the best Atlantic salmon you'll find anywhere. Cod that's salted and dried a dozen different ways. Langoustines and scallops that grow slowly in that ice-cold water, and even rhubarb cake, made from one of the few plants stubborn enough to grow there. If you're a seafood person, this might honestly be one of the best places on the planet to eat. Fact 10. A tiny economy that does one thing extremely well. At first glance, the Faroes' economy looks way too quiet to take seriously. No skyscrapers, no big financial district, no crowded shopping streets. You'd think a place this calm has to be falling behind. It's not. The entire economy runs on the ocean. Fishing and salmon farming aren't just industries here. They're the reason the islands can support people at all. Fish and fish products make up somewhere around 90 to 95% of everything they export. One local put it plainly, without fish, they couldn't live here. That's not a saying, that's just math. What really makes the difference is that they control nearly the entire supply chain, from the boats all the way to the export docks. And the results speak for themselves. Unemployment is often under 1% and one of the lowest rates anywhere on Earth. And average income rivals or beats mainland Denmark. They're not standing still either. There are craft breweries popping up, wool studios turning out high-end knitwear, and even a small but growing tech scene. with young people starting software companies right alongside the fishing boats. One honest footnote that doesn't make it into most travel videos: the Faroe Islands are part of the Kingdom of Denmark, and Danish funding has genuinely helped make some of this possible. But what they've built on top of that with so few people is still impressive. Fact 11: a dance with no instruments at all. Picture walking into a packed hall on a Faroes evening and hearing nothing but voices, no guitars, no drums, no speakers, just hundreds of people singing together, filling the whole room. That's the Faroes chain dance, one of the oldest folk dances still around in Europe, going back more than 700 years to the Viking Age. People link hands, form one giant circle, and step in a slow, repeating pattern that can go on for hours, sometimes well into the night. Sounds simple? Keeping that rhythm with hundreds of people moving as one is anything but. In the middle of it all stands the lead singer, who has to remember entire ancient ballads, songs that can run hundreds of verses about old kings, heroes, and Norse legend. The singer carries each verse alone, and the whole circle answers back on the chorus. No band, because there was never supposed to be one. The voices are the instrument. The stomp of feet on the wooden floor is the percussion. As more people join in, the circle grows and starts folding back on itself like a maze drifting across the room. It was never really about putting on a show. It was about being together and remembering the people who stood in that exact same circle long before anyone alive today was born. Fact 12: scenery so dramatic, it starts to feel normal. If the Faroe Islands already sound like the edge of the world, wait until you see the actual landscape. Start with Mulafossur, near the tiny village of Gassadalur, a waterfall that pours straight off a green cliff and drops directly into the open Atlantic, with a few grass-roofed houses sitting quietly behind it, looking like something out of a storybook. And the wild part? Waterfalls like that are everywhere out here. There are more waterfalls than there are villages. After a while, watching a river launch itself off a cliff into the sea starts to feel completely ordinary. Then there's Survagsvatn, the largest lake on the islands, which pulls off one of the best optical illusions in Europe. From the right angle, the lake looks like it's floating above the ocean, hanging in midair. It's sitting safely on land. But the cliffs and the angle trick your brain so well, you won't believe it even when someone explains it to you. Not far from there is Drangarnir, a sea stack with a natural arch cut through it by nothing but wind and waves. So clean it looks like a doorway sitting in the middle of the ocean. You don't need skyscrapers when you've got cliffs hundreds of meters tall dropping straight into white surf, with tens of thousands of seabirds, including puffins, nesting along the walls every summer. Fact 13: one of the most expensive places to live in Europe. Living on a remote scatter of islands in the middle of the North Atlantic comes with a price tag, and you feel it the second you open your wallet. Because the Faroe Islands sit hundreds of miles from any major market, almost everything has to be shipped or flown in across a lot of cold ocean. And here's the trap: a big country can spread shipping costs across millions of buyers. Out here, that same cost gets split among a population smaller than a lot of single towns back home. You feel it on the price tag. A single watermelon can run you close to $20. A simple restaurant meal can easily cost $25 to $35, and that's for something pretty basic, not a fancy night out. And it's not just groceries. Finding a place to stay can be tough too, since the whole country only has a little over 1,000 hotel rooms total. Visit during the short, busy summer season, and wait too long to book, and you're either paying a premium or finding nothing at all. The Faroes are one of the most isolated markets in Europe. Every orange, every TV, every appliance crossed an ocean before it ever hit a shelf. Fact 14: where the women leave and the young come back. There's a quieter imbalance under the surface here that shapes daily life more than people realize. There are noticeably more men than women, by roughly 2,000 in a population just over 50,000. Part of that is the nature of the work. A lot of it's still tied to the sea, physical jobs that have traditionally gone to men. But the bigger reason is that young women leave. After school, a lot of them move to Denmark, Norway, or elsewhere in Europe, chasing universities, careers, and opportunities the islands just can't offer yet. And a lot of them don't come back. This has reshaped families in real ways. Over the years, a number of Faroe's men have looked outside the North Atlantic for a partner. And today, a few hundred women from countries like Thailand and the Philippines call these islands home, now among the largest minority communities there. That's a massive adjustment, trading a warm, tropical climate for cold wind, long winters, and months of darkness. That takes real patience, and it deserves to be talked about as exactly what it is: people building lives and families, not a punchline, but there's a hopeful side too. More and more young Faroes who left for college are choosing to come back home afterward, pulled in by family and a quality of life that's hard to find anywhere else. And they're bringing new ideas back with them. New businesses, new ways of working remotely, new energy, slowly reshaping the very islands they once felt they had to leave. Fact 15. The holiday. The shuts down the entire country. Most countries celebrate their national day with fireworks or a parade. The Faroe Islands do something stranger, and they basically pause the whole country. Every year on July 28th and 29th, the islands come together for a festival called Ólafsøka. For 2 full days, normal life pretty much stops, and the entire nation crowds into the tiny capital. The holiday honors Saint Olaf, a Viking king of Norway who died back in 1030. And they've been celebrating his memory for almost 1,000 years. The first thing you'd notice is the clothing. Entire families show up in traditional Faroes outfits, decorated with silver buckles and brooches, and even the babies are dressed up in tiny matching versions, down to the little striped caps. It's the kind of thing where grandparents, parents, and grandkids are all wearing the same style of outfit their families worn for generations. One of the biggest highlights is the rowing race, long wooden boats with crews of 5, 6, 8, or 10 rowers competing in a championship final after a whole season of races. And here's the detail that makes it genuinely unusual. During those same 2 days, the city is full of concerts, folk music, art, and the old chain dance, while members of parliament walk in a procession to the cathedral to formally open a new session of government. Not many places on Earth combine a national holiday, a sports final, a music festival, and the opening of Parliament into one single event. Fact 16. The tradition the world keeps arguing about. No honest look at these islands skips over this one. It's called the Grindadrap, a hunt of pilot whales and dolphins that goes back more than 1,000 years to the Viking era. The history explains the why. On isolated islands with almost no farmland, where surviving winter depended on whatever the sea provided, a single pod of pilot whales driven into a bay could feed an entire community through a long, dark season. For most of Faroe's history, this wasn't sport, it was survival. The meat still gets shared among local families instead of sold, and for a lot of Faroes, it remains a real part of their cultural identity. From the outside, it looks very different. Animal welfare groups call it one of the most controversial practices in Europe, and the footage that circulates online draws serious criticism every year. The numbers are real and worth saying plainly. In 2024, records show 599 pilot whales and 153 white-sided dolphins were taken. In 2025, the total climbed even higher, close to 1,000 animals. There's no fixed season and no set quota. And critics make a fair point. The islands now enjoy a high standard of living and don't need this to survive the way they once did. This is exactly where the Faroe Islands stopped fitting into a simple story. A community known for being calm and kind to each other, holding onto a tradition a lot of the world finds hard to accept. There's no neat conclusion here. I'll just leave that with you to think about. So back to the question we started with. Why do more than 50,000 people choose to live at the cold, windy edge of the map instead of somewhere easier? By now, you've probably put it together. They stay for the safety, the kind where a kid can wander off and nobody panics. For the community, where you don't need a lock on your door and a stranger can be a dinner guest by that afternoon. For the quiet, real quiet, the kind most of the world paved over decades ago. And for a connection to the land so strong it stops being scenery and starts being part of who they are. Now, it'd be dishonest to say nobody out there ever wishes they were somewhere else. Some people do. This place has never claimed to be perfect. The cost of living is brutal, the winters are long and dark, and the nearest big city is a plane ride away. But what the Faroe Islands really leave you with isn't a travel destination. It's a question aimed right back at your own life. In a world that keeps getting louder and faster, here's a place that decided to slow down, not because it couldn't keep up, but because it didn't need to. A day built around the ocean, familiar work, a warm meal, and a few old stories, that's enough for them. So here's my real question for you. How fast are you actually living right now? And for what? Would you trade some of that noise for a place like this? Let me know, honestly, in the comments below. And if you like this one, stick around. There's a lot more of the world out there worth a closer look.